On June 9th, 2000, 20-year-old Jason and his girlfriend, 21-year-old Amy, were murdered in Rhode Island. Our guest today is Kellie, and she tells us this story and how it changed the trajectory of her life. I'm Barbara Ann, and this is Inspiring Herstory. Hi, Kellie, and welcome to the show.
Hi.
I'm very happy that we were finally able to reconnect. So tell us about your brother, Jason Burgeson, his girlfriend, Amy Shute, and what happened on June 9th, 2000.
So I think I had lived a pretty normal child rearing with, a nuclear family, mom, dad, brother. And on June 9th, 2000, I was 26 years old. And my brother was going out to dinner with his girlfriend. And this was kind of before cell phones. At least my brother didn't have one at that time. And I was supposed to go meet him down in Providence to go to dinner. And then we were going to go afterwards and go dancing and listen to some music. And I got home from work and I said to my husband on June 8th, did Jason call my brother? And he said no. And I said, well, we were supposed to go out to dinner with him. I guess he forgot to call me. So I just kind of thought that was just, I would just see him the next day. But unfortunately, that was not what the universe had planned for that night. So he had gone out to dinner with his girlfriend. He did meet up with some friends and they went dancing. And then at the end of the night, he was walking back to his car with his girlfriend, and they were approached by 5 men at gunpoint. And two of the men forced my brother and his girlfriend into the backseat of his own vehicle, and they decided to drive them to a construction site where they robbed them of just $18 in change. They had asked my brother if he had any money, and my brother said no, which he lied. Because the coroner later found money in his shoe. And so he had $18 in a cup that was in change in his center console. And so they wanted his car and they needed a ride and they wanted money, but they didn't get enough of that. So they decided after, when they had my brother and his girlfriend in the back of the car, that they needed to kill them because they had seen their face. So they drove them to a construction site that was they drove them to Button Hole Golf Course, but it was under construction. It wasn't yet a golf course. So it was just drive down into this pit where they was like all these, heavy equipment and dirt and things like that. And so they drove them there. And then there was, they made them both get out of the car and they debated on whether or not to rape my brother's girlfriend, Amy Shute, in front of the two of them and decided against it. And then they made them get down on the ground while they were begging for their lives. And they were hugging. And there was kind of, dissension in the ranks amongst the 5 who was going to pull the trigger. And turns out Gregory Floyd had the gun. And there was another man named Samuel Sanchez who had said to him, pull the trigger, what are you waiting for? Just do it, and let's get going with the rest of our night. And I don't really think that Gregory Floyd wanted to pull the trigger because he wasn't initially pulling the trigger. And I think that there was a pack mentality that night, and there was peer pressure, and he was looking for acceptance when he hadn't had any his whole life. And Samuel Sanchez said, give me the gun, I'm going to do it. If you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. And Gregory Floyd just pulled the trigger. And he shot my brother and he shot Amy. He shot them both in the head.
Oh, man. And
so that was I think, the significant event in my life that just, so many of us have crosses to bear, some of us lose children or, we fighting addiction or, lose loved ones in different ways, but we all have crosses to bear. And this was the event that just pretty much changed the whole trajectory of my life and the life of my parents.
How did you find out that this happened?
So the next day, initially, we didn't suspect anything was wrong. Initially, he had said, after we go out to dinner and dancing, I'm going to sleep overnight at my girlfriend's house, and then I am going to go to work from there. So we weren't expecting to see him until on June 9th at night. And he was shot at about 2:00 in the morning on June 9th. And then his body and the body of his girlfriend were just left there. Well, the following day, a groundskeeper was going and driving in a vehicle and saw what he thought was trash, that people had dumped trash, because he saw these piles of things on the side of the road. And so he stopped and immediately called 911 because it was two bodies. It took a while to figure out who my brother and Amy were, because they didn't have any ID, and there was no vehicle there. The ID was in the vehicle. So eventually they figured out who it was, and they called my parent. Well, the police actually didn't call. The police showed up at my parents' door, and they knocked. And I was married. I didn't live at home. And they told my parents what had happened and that they were still piecing together the investigation, and they hadn't found out who had done it. And then they said, is there anyone else that needs to be notified? And my mom said, my daughter. So my mom called me, and my husband answered the phone, and I had just walked in from work, probably like 6:30 at night on June 9th. And my husband has often talked about how he did not want to hand me the phone because my mother had said, Nick, Jason's dead. Let me talk to Kellie. And he looked at me, and I've never seen that look before, and I hope I never see it again. But I said to him, who's on the phone? He said, it's your mom. I said, well, let me talk to her. And he goes, no. And I said, what do you mean? And he was holding the phone to his heart, and I could tell he so knew what was going to happen, when he handed me that phone. So he gave me the phone, and I answered, and I couldn't believe it, because my brother did not have an enemy. He was friends with everyone, even girls that he had dated in the past. Never had a bad word to say about him. If they broke up, they would stay friends afterwards. And he was just 20 years old when he passed. So he still, had a lot of life to live.
What did life look like in the next few days following that?
Lots of anger. No eating, no sleeping. It was very dark. I had worked at this job that I loved. I worked for a nonprofit animal shelter. I had done some vet teching, and then I was doing nonprofit marketing. I'd moved over to marketing, and I was running the marketing department, and I really loved my job, and I could not go back to work. My boss kept saying, when do you think you can come back? And it was months. I said, I don't think I can come back. She held my position for, I want to say, maybe 6 months. And then I tried to go back to work, and I couldn't function. So I just kind of got through with that job, and they were very understanding. But
I can't even fathom what you and your family were going through. In the weeks and months that followed, what was the process like for you to try and get some answers?
It was a lot of phone calls with detectives. It was not even believing when you turn on the TV and watch the news at night that your loved one's body was being shown over and over and over again with a white sheet over them on all the different news channels. Tons and tons of reporters parked outside the house, people wanting interviews, and senators reaching out. And it was, I don't know. I don't really know the word for it. It was just nothing that, anyone would ever want to live through.
Did you have children by this time?
I did not. I did not have children at the time, but my husband and I had only been married for about 6 months. when this happened. And, I often think, the wife that he signed up to marry isn't the wife that he ended up getting, because I was far more outgoing and happy-go-lucky prior to this event. And then he got a wife that would scream at night when she would try to go to sleep, because I would have nightmares about my brother's head being in pieces and me having to put the pieces back together and holding him in my hands. And I couldn't go to the movie theater. I couldn't watch any movies, any type of show that had any type of violence or guns. I didn't want anything to do with it. I had to leave the room. And just a lot of deep, dark soul searching and trying to find why, the whys. I think for my mom, I think the losing of, all loss is hard, but I think for my mom, losing a child, is far different than a sibling losing, each other. And I don't think my mom really wanted to keep going. She was tired. She was broken. She lost her faith. And we had to just go through so many meetings with the Attorney General's office. And because my brothers, we lived in Massachusetts, and the car crossed state lines into the state of Rhode Island, because there was a murder that can be charged under federal guidelines as a felony, even though, and there's a cardinal right outside the window right now as I'm talking to you. So for a while, we were pushing for the death penalty.
You were pushing for the death penalty for all 5 men?
Yeah, we had thousands and thousands of signatures. I had to channel my energy into something at that time, because you just feel so helpless. And so I came up with this letter writing campaign, because everyone kept saying, I wish we could do something to help, and I wish we could do something to help, and what can we do to help? And we flooded the Attorney General's office with thousands and thousands of letters pushing for the death penalty. I would take the letter that I kind of wrote the letter, and then I would photocopy hundreds of copies, and then I would go and drop them off at businesses, and people would sign them with their name and address. And then I would go back and I would pick them up, and we would mail so many, thousands, into the Attorney General's office pushing for the death penalty. It was a time of being very supported by our community, with a lot of people that they really wanted to do something to help. But I think, I don't know, as time goes on, people that live through it, like us, the victims of the family, like we're still in hell, but everyone else moves on. And that's one of the things that I think I've kind of learned, that, the clock keeps ticking, and people have to go on with their life. And for me, I always try to be the friend that now shows up, not only when something happens, but I try to show up after something happens, and a week from when something happens, and a month from when something happens, and all the way down the road. Because, people just kind of, it's natural. It's life. Like, you have to go back to life, So I just try to be the person that I wish that we had in our life, that would have showing up for us. It was just my mom, my dad, myself, and my husband at the time.
Were you able to talk to your parents about this in time?
I think my mom and I always spoke about it. I think my father held a lot in. Ultimately, I think that made him sick. He ended up with congestive heart failure and problems with his lungs. And I think that he held too much. And I think that eventually that got, filtered over into physical form and made him sick in a physical plane. Initially, when everything happened, because there was 5 of them, it was 5 trials that we were going to have to go through, 5 separate trials. And in the eyes of the law, there's culpability and varying degrees of culpability. So the person who pulls the trigger isn't quite as quote unquote culpable as the person who sat in the back seat or the person who rode along in a separate vehicle. So trying to get them all charged with the same exact sentencing outcome was a little bit difficult. 3 of them pled guilty. 3 pled guilty to life in federal prison in exchange for taking the death penalty off of the table. And 1 refused. He pled not guilty. That was Kenneth Day. Kenneth Day pled not guilty. And in the eyes of a federal case, he was found not guilty, but they kicked it down to a state level. And on the state level, he was found guilty because it's different sentencing guidelines. Yeah. So on the state level, he was found guilty. And what happened with him was when his picture was shown on the news, 2 or 3 more people came forward and said that Kenneth Day had robbed them in the park in Providence with a baseball bat. And they had never found who it was that had done it. And so they ended up prosecuting those cases against him as well. So he was found guilty on my brother's case, Amy's case. And then he was found guilty with all these other felony robbery charges. So he has a life sentence in Rhode Island now. And then there's 1 more who is going to get out. He will get out, I think, in 2030. There's 1 that will get out in 2030.
You spoke of your father and how you believe that a lot of the stuff that he held inside manifested in a physical way. Is that part of the reason why you went into that direction of healing?
Initially I was trying to heal myself, and I had tried going to grief talk therapy, and which, to each their own. For me, talking about it wasn't fixing it. It wasn't helping me feel better. It was actually making me feel worse every single time I went. And I think when you're dealing with a grief, when it's wrapped up in a murder case, is different than, losing, your grandmother who was 95, So somebody being, murdered and taken from you at such a young age when they had such a bright, promising future is a whole level, another level of grief to work through, and a lot of anger to work through. So, we were going to group grief therapy. My mom and I were going, and there's so many stages of grief. And we were in these groups and people were talking about putting up their Christmas tree and celebrating the holidays. And my mother and I looked at each other and we were just like, we can't put up a Christmas tree. Like, there is not going to be any Christmas this year. So ultimately ended up ending grief therapy, and someone had mentioned Reiki to me. And so I thought, well, I've never really heard about Reiki. Let me try it. So I went, and I found the healing to be profound. The first time I went, I saw all colors in my third eye, all beautiful purple and green and white. And just a sense of calmness and peace came over me, and a sense of lightness that I hadn't felt in a very long time. The heaviness of everything was just living inside of my body. And so I was going to treatments regularly for about a year. And after that year, the Reiki master that I was going to see, she said, "Hey, I'm teaching a class. Do you want to learn?" And I had said, no. And then I said, well, maybe. Okay. So I thought to myself, well, what do you have to lose? You can work on yourself at home, and then maybe work on your family and your friends. So that was my only initial intent, was to just kind of work on myself, heal myself, and then work on friends and family that may need it. But as soon as I said yes, it was almost like the universe kind of pushed me through the door and said, no, actually, we're going to change what you're doing in your life path, and you're going to step into what you're really supposed to do and what your soul's purpose, your soul's work is. And I ended up going all the way through and becoming a Reiki master. And I still was kind of in the closet, even though I was a practicing Reiki master, and I kind of worked on friends and family. I was in the quote unquote spiritual closet, if you want to call it. Because
you weren't sure how people were going to react. I mean, Reiki is one of those things that you either, even if you don't believe in it, you find that it is profound. And a lot of people don't want to admit that,
yes.
So that's woo woo in their world. So is that what you mean by when you said you were in the closet?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that there was a fear of judgment. And, people knew who I was before. I mean, I was a biology major when I went to college. Like it was very earth, sciency, just always out in the woods. And so this was like completely different.
Did you ever did you ever offer, I should say, Reiki to your mom or to your dad?
Yes. Yes, I did. And my dad, he did let me work on him a couple of times. And my mom will let me work on her. Not often, but she will.
Did they find that that was helpful, like you did?
I don't think they found it helpful to the level that I do or did. I think it has to be something you're ready for. And sometimes I think that you're in a phase in your life where you may receive it. And I say this even now to my students when I teach Reiki. I say your job may be just to plant a seed, and you have to just compassionately detach from whatever that is, because you need to do what you need to do. Connect to a higher source, let the Reiki energy come through you and show that light to the person. And then it's up to them what they want to do with that. And so sometimes people receive a Reiki treatment and they're not ready for it. And then a couple years go by and they get to a point in their life where they say, you know what? I tried this 8 or 10 years ago and I really didn't think it was for me, but now I think I'm ready. And then they come back and their experience is completely different.
Right. It's all about opening up. Do you find, or did you find at some point that when you worked on, when you were offering Reiki, when you were working with a client, did you find that that was helpful for you as well? Did you also receive healing during that, or was that completely separate?
I definitely think that I received healing as being a channel that holds the light. I did get a lot of healing. And I think that, the trajectory of my business has changed over the years, because when I first went into business, which this is kind of a funny story, worth mentioning, I went to go see a medium, and I took my mom and myself, and it was about 150 people in a room. And the medium came over to me first, and she said, "Did your brother die in Rhode Island of a gunshot wound to the head?" And I said, "Yes." And I started bawling. And she said, "Well, he wants to know what the hell you're doing with your life and why you haven't opened your healing arts business yet." So the fact that he kind of came through and said that, I was just so, dumbfounded. And I said, okay, I got to jump in with both feet. So I quit my job and I jumped in with both feet and started renting a space and then started working on people. And in the beginning of my business, I think everyone who sat on or laid down on my table, I should say, was going through grief. And I think that was because the vibrational frequency that I was at was, even though I was years out from my brother's death, I was still working through grief. And it took about 8 years for all of the trials to be done and everyone to be sentenced.
And so that just drags everything out, the emotional component for you and the...
Right.
That had to have been a long 8 years.
Yes, it was. Absolutely.
What would you tell someone who's experiencing or has experienced such a devastating, unexpected loss such as yours? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say I understand where you're coming from and you're not alone, for sure. I think now, and I mean, we're talking 22 years out here. I'm 22 years out. So, be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself. Know that these things take time to work through, that you have to surround yourself with the vibration of people that lift you up. And when you're in a dark place, you cannot be around people that are negative, because they will just drag you down further. So finding a tribe, finding a group of people that can lift you up, that know where you're coming from, that can sympathize and empathize. I think a lot of times what happens to people, I'm thinking of one Reiki student in particular who lost her son. and her son was murdered. And she said, I'm still sad, and my friends don't want me to be sad anymore. But sometimes you have to be sad. You have to work through it, and you have to, keep going through. Unfortunately, there's no way around grief. There's no shortcut, and you just have to keep going one foot in front of the other and just keep going. And I just started reading books. I read so many books, and I started taking and piecing together the parts of the things that made sense to me and in relation to my brother's life and his soul and the purpose of his soul and our own souls. And that reading kind of helped me mold a picture of, I think, what happened and why it happened and how it happened. And I think now, at this point in my life, I can look back and I can say that I think what happened was that, I wasn't raised to be a person that believed in reincarnation. I was raised to, one and done. And you have to, pray to God and try to be a good person. And then you go up to heaven, and then you get to be judged. And then they decide how good of a person you are or not. But I think now that I do believe in reincarnation, I don't know 100% of what it is that, I can't specifically say that I'm this or I'm that, I'm Buddhist, I'm whatever. But I think that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes form. And I think that we get to go up into wherever we leave when we leave here, and we decide if we want to come back, and we decide what lessons that we want to learn, and we decide who's in our life. And sometimes we make soul contracts with people that may seem like they are the quote unquote bad guy, but that we agree that we have to learn a certain lesson for whatever reason from them. And we get to learn those lessons that when we get down here, they do not feel good. But the ultimate goal is growth of our soul. And I think that, that's why we come down here and we have challenges that we have to face. And I think that my brother and I have met, in our family have walked many lives together. And I think that my brother's a very old soul. And I think this time when he was incarnated, he only had to live 20 years and his work was done. And I think that because there were different events that happened in his life that kind of set the scene for the ending. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I think that we contracted together for him to help us learn forgiveness in this lifetime. And I think he agreed to sacrifice himself for the higher growth of our family as a whole, because maybe this was a lesson that he had already learned, which is forgiveness. And then we agreed that this would be what happened in this lifetime. So when my brother was born, he was actually born to a mother who was 16 years old and didn't want him. My brother was adopted. And my mother, when she had me, was told by the doctor, you can never have another child, because she almost died during childbirth. So my parents set out, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I kept saying to my parents, I want a brother. I want a brother. I want a brother. I was very specific that it had to be a brother. And so my parents started looking at each other like, what are we going to do? Maybe we should adopt. So they started to go through different adoption agencies to try to find a brother for me. And they found a baby who was in Tennessee that was born addicted to drugs. And they were flying to Tennessee to go get that little boy. And when they got there, that little boy died. Yeah, so my parents came back, and I was here with my aunt and my grandmother, and I was expecting to see my parents bring home my little baby brother, and they had no baby. And so I, didn't really understand at the time, at that young age, and I don't actually even remember what my parents said to me then, but obviously I know at this age, but how they broke it to me. But we ended up that they found a baby who was in an adoption agency that had been sitting in foster care for 18 months and nobody wanted him. And this was my brother. And so they found him, and he was local, and they adopted him. When they adopted him, he had been with the same foster mother for 18 months. And so this woman had already been a large part of his life. So my parents kind of kept that woman in his life so that he could still have a relationship with her. And immediately I took this baby under my wing, and I just wanted, I was about 7 years old, and he was my little munchkin, and I would just, hold him and just do everything with him. And I was so happy. And I finally was just like, I have my baby brother. And he went on, through the years, and I always was like the big sister, the big protector. And he, when I got to the age of when I would start dating, he would cry and he would want to go on the date with me. And so I felt so guilty leaving him. So I remember I was dating this guy. I was about 18. And he said, do you want to go bowling? I said, yeah, sure. I said, but my brother's coming. And he's like, your brother's coming on a date with us? And I was like, yeah, we're a package deal. And if he can't come, then I'm not going. And the guy was like, okay, well, that's fine. He can come. So he would come with me on dates. And, I'd go to all his baseball games and be in the front row cheering him on and whatnot. But then when he became 18 himself, he decided to try to find his birth mother. And he found her, and she didn't want anything to do with him. And he was completely okay with it. And I was so pissed for him. I was pissed. I thought, this kid has lived his whole life without you, and now he has the drive and the want to meet you, and you don't want anything to do with him. And she had moved on with her life. She had other children. I'm sure no one knew that he existed, and it was going to mess things up for her. So she didn't want anything to do with him. So he said, Kel, it's okay. It's okay. He said, I'm happy. I'm good. I'm fine. Don't let it, make you mad. Don't hold on to it. Let it go. And I thought, what? Why? No, this isn't right. And I wanted to hold on to it, but he said, let it go. Well, then when he was 19 years old, he went to a gas station in a local town next to us, and a boy had his bike stolen. He was about 12 years old, and his bike was stolen by this group of kids, these 5 kids. And the 5 kids were taunting him, and they stole his bike, and the kid was crying. And so my brother said to them, hey, just give the kid his bike back. He was there just getting gas, give the kid his bike back. And so they all approached him, and he was by himself, and there was 5 men that attacked him, and they beat him unconscious. They took a piece of broken piece of pavement, and they smashed him in the face. They broke his nose. His eyes were swollen shut. He was on the ground. They were kicking him and kicking him and kicking him. They broke his ribs. The little boy, who was 12, ran inside and told the clerk, call 911, and the clerk called 911, and the ambulance came and took him. And he I went to go see him in the hospital. His face was unrecognizable. And the doctor said he almost died. They said that his nose was broken and almost pierced his brain. And it was 1 millimeter from piercing his brain. And had it gone 1 millimeter more, he would have died. And when he came through that, my parents and myself were all very upset, and we all wanted justice. And he said, just let it go. Who cares? I'm moving on. And I thought, what person, as I reflect back, I would think to myself, what person would say after they just got the crap beat out of them, let it go, like just forgive them? And, my mother had said, no, we want them to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Well, the problem was they were all minors. Everybody was under 18. So one kid got community service. I think he had to do like 10 hours, and the rest got nothing, even though they almost killed him. So that event happening the year before he actually died. When I read the book called The Other Side by Sylvia Brown, who's a medium. So she wrote this. She wrote so many books, but she wrote The Other Side, and then she wrote The Other Side and Back. So if anyone is out there, like, those are awesome books to kind of read. And it talks about, the channeled messages she got from the other side about what happens when someone passes away, and how, they are cocooned and put into this safe place while they're adjusting, and their soul is adjusting and all these things. But she talks about exit points, and what was so kind of unwavering for me when I looked at, started evaluating and putting all the pieces of the puzzle together was that, according to Sylvia, we have these exit points that are in our life. And maybe all of us can say, boy, I had the scariest thing happen to me. Something almost happened to me. I almost hit a deer, or a deer almost, came through my windshield, or I almost got in a car accident or whatever. And then you don't. So she talks about how our soul has these exit points, and there's so many exit points that each person has in our lives. And lots of times that the exit point can be decided if the soul is ready to go, it will go at that time. But if it's not ready, it will go the next exit point that comes around. And when I started thinking about that, I thought about my brother and how the similarities between the incident that had happened the year before and how he wanted forgiveness for these 5 men. And that number 5, again, like my brother was in the quote unquote wrong place at the wrong time, both incidents, and then ultimately the incident that stole his life this time. And I thought to myself, how can this not be true? Because here I read this book and it was just the similarities were so striking, 5 men again, wrong place, wrong time, how he would want forgiveness, because that's what he wanted the other times in his life when significant events happened, when the 5 men had attacked him at the gas station, and then when his mother and father wanted nothing to do with him, his biological parents. So I kind of thought to myself, okay, I have work to do. And then I started working on, and I hate to say the word forgiveness, because I feel like that word is a loaded word. And I feel like we're taught from a young age, little Tommy hits somebody on the playground and he has to say sorry. And then the other kid says, it's okay. Right. Well, sometimes things are not okay. Some things are not acceptable in any form. And I think that when some people feel like the word forgiveness comes into play, you're like, that's unforgivable. I mean, people who have been raped or victims of, unspeakable crimes and survived. No, some things are not forgivable. But I think what happens is ultimately when we hold things like my dad, we make ourselves sick. And I did end up seeing it in my own life, because in my early 30s, I decided that I wasn't going to talk about this anymore. I had small children, and one day I was eating a sandwich. The kids were in the high chair and I started choking. And I was choking so bad and so severely. I had water pouring down my eyes. I was home alone. And I thought, I can't call 911 because I can't talk. I can't even say what is the matter with me, because I couldn't speak because I was choking. And I had been choking and I kept ignoring it. And long story short, I had thyroid cancer and I had a large mass that was in my throat. And I had been putting myself on the back burner, making excuses for myself. I mean, saying, well, you have small children, you always eat standing up. What mother doesn't eat standing up? You just got to take more time and be more mindful and chew slower. But I think I actually, now in retrospect, I shut my own throat chakra down because I refused to talk about the stuff that had happened with my brother. And it not so much for my own self, but for the people that surrounded me, because I think, well, geez, they're sick of hearing me talk about my brother, or, other people aren't in the same phase of life that I'm in and don't understand the grief. So they don't want to hear it anymore. And so I just try to stop. I almost feel like bothering, quote unquote, bothering people with, that stuff that I was carrying on my heart, and the anger and resentment and feeling robbed. So I made myself sick. And so now I talk about it all the time. I talk about it every time I teach a class, and how I believe that we have, this DNA in our body that maybe we would have gotten high cholesterol, or maybe we would have got cancer, but maybe we wouldn't have got it until we were 70 or 80. But instead, when we shut our own bodies down, we flip a switch to make those things start happening sooner and quicker.
Have you been able to forgive all 5 men?
I'm still working on one. Ironically, the trigger man was the first person that I was able to extend, and if you want to say that word, forgiveness, in my heart to him. Because when he got on that stand, I saw a wounded child. I saw remorse. I saw a person that was not in control of his emotions or himself. He apologized. I mean, obviously that means nothing, but as far as, I mean, it does mean something. I think it was a heartfelt apology. And I just saw a lost soul. And I was able to kind of look at it from a higher perspective. Interestingly, what happened with Gregory Floyd, who pulled the trigger, was 2 years ago. We got a letter, I got a letter in the mail that said Gregory Floyd is filing for compassionate release and is trying to get out of jail. And that his case was going to be heard by the warden of the prison. And then if the warden of the prison denied it, then it would go up through the ranks of federal all the way down to, Washington, D.C. And I thought, oh, hell no. Like, you are not, I don't care what's going on with you. You are not getting out. He had a brain tumor. He had a brain tumor at 40 years old, and he was dying. And he was given less than 6 months to live. And I thought to myself, what are the chances of shooting 2 people in the head, and then you at 40 years old get a brain tumor? I would be willing to bet pretty,
That's
not a coincidence. Astronomical amount of coincidence. You know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely.
So Gregory Floyd died on my brother's birthday. I fought to keep him in jail. We all wrote letters to the warden of the prison. I did more interviews. I was on the news. And ultimately, the warden had said that he didn't want to make a determination on the case. So then it went to Washington. And then we fought all the way to Washington to keep him in. And he stayed, and then he died. And when he died, it was on my brother's birthday. And when I got that letter in the mail that said that he died on February 15th, I was in shock because I knew he was going to die. But to die on my brother's birthday just further said to me that there was some type of soul contract between the two of them. Either my brother said, fuck you, this is my birthday, now you can die too.
That's exactly what I would have said.
Happy birthday to me, fucker.
The ultimate fuck you.
Or there was some type of contract where it was, he passed on that day, so the families could make some type of connection that would ultimately help us realize and grow from that. But to get back to your question about the forgiveness, I'm very much an in control person, and I think that you can appreciate that because I feel like you are very much the same.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I like to call myself a recovering perfectionist, recovering type A, trying to learn how to, quote, go with the flow. Some days it's easier than others, but for me, it was a control thing about the forgiveness because I want to live my life the way that I want to live my life. And I do not want to live my life with another person who does not deserve to be anywhere in my body, in my thoughts, in my cellular space, giving them free rent, so to speak, and allowing them to control how I feel and allowing them to make me carry anger that affects the vibrational frequency that I live my daily life at. And for me, it was detachment. It was detachment and acceptance. So it was saying to myself, there's a lesson in what happened, and I am no longer going to allow anything that you have said or done or any situation that has occurred to live in my body. And when I talk to my clients and we talk about letting go of anger and resentment, because that is something that lives huge in everyone's body. I think they did a study with the Cancer Institute of America, and it was something like 78 or 79, or I don't know, it was hovering around 80% of the people that were in there admitted that they had issues surrounding forgiveness. So either that was forgiveness of self for something that the person did and didn't want to, or was continuously rather judging themselves for something that they did, or hurt and pain that they were carrying from something that somebody else had done to them. And after, having my little stint with thyroid cancer, I realized I'm holding and I'm making myself sick, and no one is allowed to have that power in my body. And that was how I kind of came to detachment and acceptance, I think, in what was happening and what happened. And I'm in a stage now where, I do healing work, and I mean, I'm because I do this for work, I think I'm probably, I don't want to say more blessed. I don't know how else you would say it. I can see my brother. I can talk to my brother. Other people don't get that. And, when I'm working with Reiki on somebody that's actively passing or getting ready to cross, when I'm working with a hospice patient, I see him come. He comes and he stands in the light, and I work as a partner with him, and I pass the souls to him, and he stands there and he helps them and he takes them to wherever it is that they need to go. I think that's a gift. And one of my soul's purpose is to be here and be able to do this type of healing work and help, bring other people to the light. But, that's probably not what most people do after they go through something like this. And I think that, moms that are grieving, who have lost children, spouses who are grieving, children that are grieving the loss of parents. Not everybody is like, oh, I'm going to go do healing arts work now because hopefully I can talk to my, passed over loved one. I think I've been here a few times and was gifted this purpose in this lifetime.
You began a healing center called Healing Tree Wellness Center for Reiki, hypnosis, and acupuncture.
Yes. So I see private people for one-on-one Reiki treatments, and then a large part of my practice is teaching. So I am an Usui Reiki master, a Holy Fire Reiki master, master teacher, and a Karuna Reiki master teacher. So I teach all those Reiki classes, and I get to hang out with the most fabulous tribe of people who are growing and ascending. And it's just wonderful to be a part of that. And I think, I was realizing when I was working on certain people with the Reiki, certain people were coming back and they were having time after, session after session, the same areas of their body that were still shut down. And so I said to myself, there has to be more to this than, just go into a Reiki practitioner, have them balance you, and then just go home and just go live your life, So I decided to kind of look more into the mind-body connection. And that's when I decided that I would take a hypnotherapy course and became a certified hypnotherapist. And now I incorporate that into my Reiki sessions when I work with people. And I really focus on the mind-body connection and teaching people how powerful our thoughts are. And if you think negative thoughts, it actually is that, dusty cloud of vibration that brings more negative to you. And then you just get stuck in a hole. And even if you have to fake it for a while until you really, truly feel it, creating that mind-body connection and doing, positive affirmations and things like that helps to grow and balance your chakras. When I started working with people with the hypnosis coupled with the Reiki, I would see that then they would come back. And once we incorporated the mind, their sessions were completely different because now they were more in control.
I love that. Because I've been to, I can't tell you how many Reiki sessions, far too many, or not enough. I think I haven't been to one it's been a little while. And you're right. Like, you have your Reiki session, and for me, I would just feel better. I didn't have, I could feel things that didn't make sense to me, but I would go home and I'd be like, I feel relaxed. I feel comfortable. But then life happens and it's like, why did I go? Because I felt like it was just like going and having an ice cream. Now you have these calories in you, and eventually you're going to get rid of those calories, and you got to go have more to be happy again. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
You go to a session, you feel good, but you're not working on yourself. You know what I mean? You go to Reiki, and someone's working with you. I mean, I'm a Reiki practitioner, thanks to you, but I haven't practiced Reiki in it's been years, but I know the power that it can be. And you and I've had several conversations on how my mind still hasn't been able to wrap around some of that. But I love that you still tell my story about the bear, though. That's great. That cracks me up. I forgot all about that.
Oh my goodness. So all of you out there that are looking for a sign,
that was me. I had to be very specific.
Yes. I saw this meme and I thought this meme on Facebook, it said, I get the most wonderful sign. And then I question spirit and I say, I need a signier sign. And I always say a signier sign, with IER, signier sign. Oh. And I say, that's Barbara, because
there's Barbara
asking for the bear and then getting the bear. And it had to be a live bear, not a bear on a card in a store.
In front of my car.
You set all the parameters up and then you're like, I don't know. Do you think that's a sign? I think it is. Whatever you're thinking about.
Yeah, that was funny. I've had a couple of those. I don't want to see one red bird. I want to see two. Hey, Kellie, I saw two red birds. I don't think that's the right sign. God, it was terrible.
You're very bossy with the universe. You tell them how it has to be so that you know it's
And then they entertain that, and then they go, not enough, huh? No, that's just not.
They're
not
drinking. They're drinking in heaven.
Or somewhere. So, Kellie, tell us how they can follow you if they wish to reach out to you. You have a social media account, I'm sure.
I do. I am on Facebook. I am at the Healing Tree Wellness Center. There are a couple of different Healing Tree Wellness Centers, so you would have to look for the one that's in Middleborough, Massachusetts on Facebook. And then my website is www.healingtreema.com. And I have a lot of classes each month. I teach Reiki monthly. I also do integrative energy therapy. Starting to dabble in sound healing and taking a sound healing certification the end of the summer. So constantly growing and healing myself and trying to get to the next level.
And when will you know that you're at the next level?
Well, that's a great question. I think for myself, I don't know how other people feel, but I will feel a calling that I have to go learn more.
No kidding. That's cool.
And then I'll say to myself, okay, where am I going? What am I learning? And then I kind of dabble in a couple of different things or read some books and then I look up some courses and I'm like, oh, okay. Yep. This is where I'm doing next. And, then when I learn that thing, then I start teaching it to my students. And then I'm like, oh, okay, this feels good. This feels good. And then I'll sit at that level for a while. And then I'll say, what else can I learn?
That's why we get along. That's well. Well, Kellie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed your story and talking with you. And for those who, again, want to reach out to Kellie or at least see what she's all about, it's www.healingtreema.com.